the Cleveland Browns make the trade. Deshaun Watson picks Cleveland in the 11th hour over what looked like to be the finalists of Atlanta and New Orleans. And the Texans, in return, they get a first round and fourth pick this year. They get a first rounder and third rounder next year. And then in 3 years, they get a first and a fourth as well. So you end up getting six draft picks for Deshaun Watson. Now, you do trade a future 6, too. So one's like a trade-up. So you get 5 additional draft picks for Deshaun Watson. You trade up a couple of rounds in one of those, and Deshaun Watson gets a huge raise and the largest guarantee in NFL history, which, what a world we live in. The guy does not play at all in 2021. He has 22 sexual allegations against him, and the dude gets a raise. He gets traded for 6 draft picks and gets the highest guarantee in NFL history. What a world we live in, and what a world the NFL is. I look at the trade, and I don't know where you stand on it. I have a decent idea now. I didn't know before this morning. But I was looking at Twitter and looking at the reaction of a lot of people in this city and like getting their opinions. I feel like a lot of folks felt like the Houston Texans did not get enough for Deshaun Watson. In the build-up for the Deshaun Watson trade, I said that I would take 3 first-round draft picks from any team in the NFL. And when I see that Nick Caserio got 3 first-rounders from the Cleveland Browns, when I see he got a few additional mid-round picks as well, a third and 2 fourths, I'm satisfied with the trade. I think that Nick Caserio did a good job, especially considering Nick Caserio was not the driving force behind this trade. Deshaun Watson was picking where he was going to go. Nick Caserio had his baseline of what he needed in return for Deshaun Watson for the conversations ever to happen. But Deshaun Watson was a free agent, basically, because of the no-trade clause, and Nick Caserio had to take what he got. And he got 3 first, 3 mid-round picks. The Houston Texans have 2 top 15 picks this year, 2 first next year, 2 first the year after that. To me, there's a lot to be excited for from a Houston Texan fan perspective.
I think there's several things to look at when you want to broach the subject of could they have gotten more. When we were talking about it as it related to the Russell Wilson trade, you got players as well as draft picks. Could you not have gotten some players? Look, because I'll be honest with you, I'm not as much as most in terms of the over-the-top they should have gotten, and then they follow that up with something extraordinary. Like they should have gotten a lot more. I'm not going to say that. But hear me out on why I think that they could have gotten more. One, from a player perspective. I think that in order to get better the way they got better in Cleveland, and also be the team that was kind of out to the very end until they got in, that you had an initial discussion. And look, kudos to Caserio from the standpoint of he set up the best system he possibly could to have a say-so. Like, you have to give me an offer that I would be okay with before I say, okay, you can talk to Deshaun.
I think it's what happened with the Colts at the end of the day.
So as much as I kept pushing the fact that you needed competition to boost the price up as high as you could, at least he did something to where he had a narrative, right? He had to be heard, and he had to be okay with it before it went to the next level. But as it went to the next level, when that team was selected and there was only going to be one, then you could also have gone back to them and said, okay, but I still don't have to trade them to you. So let's continue to do this to where I've got to get what I got to get too. You got to at least, not that you have to hurt short term to gain all of this long term, but the things that I would be interested in is a player or two, so that, because we know how depleted this entire roster is, so that you could have added a starter at a position group or two. The other thing was focused on this year's draft, because after Deshaun gets there and he starts playing well, they're going to be a playoff team. They're going to be in the mix. They're going to have a good enough record to where that draft pick is not the
more than likely.
But the draft capital, but because of the possibility of that more than likely happening, the focus should have been more on picks for this year's upcoming draft, because you know where they're picking, and you know that, and also why there was not we heard 3 first, 2 seconds. But instead, essentially, you got 6 picks in which 3 were first.
Well, that was reported
2 were fourths,
like back in November.
But I would have liked to had more of a second or third round selections than I would have fourth round selections.
Guys, let me tell you real quick about Fitz Roofing. Fitz Roofing, dedicated and loyal to Houstonians. They're going to take care of you every step of the way, from a leaky roof to a full roof replacement on your business or your home, or maybe some home repairs, even a fence in your yard. All you got to do is call them, 832-521-3001. They're going to give you a free, no-obligation inspection. It costs you absolutely nothing, and they tell you what they can do to help you fix the problem. You want them to come back, you book them, and they are the best at doing what they do on a daily basis. Check them out at fitzroofing.com. Fitz Roofing, making a difference, one home at a time.
So those are where I think that, and we don't know the process, but that's where I would say at least I would have broached the subject. I would have liked to see them get a little more.
Listening to the Caserio press conference that he had on Saturday, whenever he talked with the media and answered all of their questions, I don't think that players were ever involved in this, period, no matter what team he was going to. I felt like Nick Caserio had his baseline of these are the draft picks we want, If a team is not willing to give this ransom of draft picks, this bounty of draft picks to us, then you're not going to meet with Deshaun Watson. I think Nick Caserio did a great job of working with Dave Mulligetta, the agent of Deshaun Watson, to be like, okay, let's handle this cordially. We understand that you want out. We understand that you're even going to pick the team, but you have to understand where we're coming from as well, that we need 3 first-rounders, 2 mid-round picks to get this deal done. And I don't believe Nick Caserio is in a position at all of power to go to the Cleveland Browns whenever Deshaun picked Cleveland and say, okay, well, now that you're the team, get rid of those 3rd and 4th and make them 2nd-round picks and 3rd-round picks this year. Because now, like, what are you trying to gain? Like, you're trying to gain, obviously, an additional round here or there. You're trying to gain what you wanted, picks this year as
knowing
opposed
where
to
the
the
picks
future.
are going to be.
Sure,
too,
I think that's valuable. I do think that that's valuable. I'm not trying to poo-poo on the idea of that because I do think that there's value there, absolutely. But the downside of that is you tick off the Cleveland Browns, you tick off Deshaun Watson, and now Deshaun Watson's still a Houston Texan, and he says I'm not going to play for you next year. So what do you do then? You say, okay, well, we're just going to keep him on the roster, and we're going to say that we're going to try to get your money back and all of that, and then next year you try to trade him with a value that's been depreciated. So Nick Caserio had zero power in any of this to be able to try to have that negotiation power.
And I hear what you're saying, Jeremy, but there's no tit for tat saying that because you push back right now that means you can't trade him until next season. You just push back initially. And we know in business, the game of chicken is played all the time. And at a certain point, you got to know that this is my last pushback, and I either got to go or I've got to be willing to face the consequences. But I think because of the fact that we still were so far away from the draft and all these other things,
sure,
that initially you could have had another discussion where you didn't have to be in a hurry to get the deal done within 24 hours and say, hey, look, I understand he picked you. We want to make a deal with you. But this is my first deal with the Houston Texans, and I'm trying to rebuild my entire franchise, and this is the biggest trade piece I have. You got to meet me a little bit more in the middle. I know you got in the door with this offer, but now that he's picked you and I had offers coming from all these different directions, now that we're focused on one-on-one, can you do something here or there just so that it makes it more worth my while? Because otherwise I may push back. I don't have to tell you my entire hand of cards, but I might push back and say, you know what? We'll take our chances. If we don't trade him this year, He's going to want to play. He's going to have sat out 2 years if he pushes the envelope this far. So,
but what are you getting at that point in return? Like, to me, it depreciates the value of Deshaun Watson. The further and further you get out from this, the harder it becomes to trade him for what you wanted. So, like, there's reward there, yes. I think there's a little bit of room for reward, getting a 2nd and 3rd this year as opposed to, like, the 3rd next year and the 4th 2 years from now. So I believe that there is reward there. I'm not denying that. I agree with that. But the risk involved of all of a sudden Cleveland saying, well, screw you, Deshaun Watson saying, well, screw you, the risk far outweighs the reward. And you still ultimately have 2 picks in the top 15 this year, 2 first-rounders the year after that, 2 first-rounders the year after that. I'm not going to get into a game of chicken whenever I still like what the Houston Texans got in return.
That's fine. I'm just saying when you say anybody that thinks they shouldn't have gotten more, and I'm telling you, I think that there's, in my way of thinking, this is why I think they could have gotten more, or at least should have broached the subject to try and get more. Because here's the thing. From the people that I've talked to, the Saints had a better offer on the table. It's just he didn't pick the Saints.
Right. But
ideally, the best return for the Texans would have come from Atlanta because they weren't playoff ready no matter what. No matter where the picks lie, they were going to be better picks.
Sure.
Whether you got players or not, it was more of a moot point because of how valuable those picks would have been. They would have been a better situation. I think the other thing that people have to realize as we discuss this is when you look at why this was even more complicated for Caserio was the fact that Deshaun, which we are now finding out, was making part of the deal be that extension and that guaranteed money and all that went to his back pocket that the Browns were willing to do. Carolina wasn't willing to do that. I think there's a reason why we now see why Carolina was out, because if Deshaun was pushing that narrative as part of, in order for me to select you, you got to not only make the deal with the Texans, but you got to take care of me too. I think that scared a lot of teams.
I would have done that in a second if I'm Carolina. For a team that's as desperate as they are for a quarterback, it was not Nick Caserio picking the team, though.